Welcome to Purpose 360. I'm Carol Cohn, and today more than ever before, companies, brands, and their partners need to stand for something beyond the bottom line. I've created this program to provide insights and ideas to share with you so that you can apply them to your work the very next day. The goal here is to up-level your purpose and to benefit companies and society. So please join us. I'm thrilled to have Kate Behncken with me today from Microsoft. She's Vice President and lead of Microsoft Philanthropies. Well, I have been a keen admirer of Microsoft ever since the company started putting a computer on everyone's desk. They put the software in those computers. And in 2003, I found my company at the time, Cone, meeting with a whole group of their executives to talk about social impact. What became of that was their first overarching campaign called Unlimited Potential. And it started them down a path to do more than just make great technology. Well, I'm thrilled today to talk about the next evolution in terms of its extensive engagement in its four focus areas in society. Under the leadership of Satya Nadella, he created bold goals and detailed plans. He transformed the culture from being hyper-competitive to also include a sense of purpose and empathy, especially how the company operates and how employees show up for work. They went from an organization of know-it-alls to an organization of learn-it-alls. Microsoft Philanthropies brings the company's vision to life by helping to empower communities and NGOs to realize the potential of technology. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Carol. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
We're going to get into Kate's background and we'll have a wonderful conversation, but I want to start to just give a sense of the context of Microsoft. And this is the CEO letter in their CSR report, and it was called Reimagining a Better Future Together. While the start of a new decade typically brings hope, we quickly saw the world come to a near standstill in 2020. It is easy to fall prey to pessimism or the sense that we individually or as a company can't make a difference. But helplessness is corrosive to hope, and hope plus work is what is required. Amid this disruption, what's clear is that we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to harness digital technology to define the world we want to live in. And for that, I'm optimistic. It is in times like these that our ability to stay true to Microsoft's mission and corporate purpose is of the utmost importance. As a company, we are steadfast in our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Well, today's conversation is going to define what does achieve more mean. Now, I want to go a little further because Satya Nadella I'm a fangirl of his. I've read his books. I read everything that he says. He is such an empathetic and powerful leader. And in fact, congratulations, Kate, because you were just named to number 3 in Fortune's Most Admired list. And you've been on the list since it was started in 1998. So congratulations.
Thanks, Carol. Look, I'm so proud of the work that Microsoft does and has been doing for a long time, focused on different societal impact initiatives around the world. And I will say leadership comes from the top. And so it's, Satya is such a support for the social impact work that the company does and continues to push us to do more, as we should.
Can you just talk a little bit, what does Microsoft Philanthropies do?
I mean, we always say that we help bring the company's mission to life by helping to empower communities and nonprofits to realize the potential of technology. And so we do that through a focus on digital skilling initiatives, so helping underserved communities get access to the digital skills needed to get jobs and improve livelihoods. We help nonprofits leverage technology to build their own capacity so that they can grow and scale and do more, advance their own missions. We help empower communities through our employee engagement program and also through some of our investments in strategic communities around the world. And then we think about ways that we can act as a convener and bring others to the table. And we don't do all of this work alone. I don't think we do any of that work alone. We do all of our work in close partnership with nonprofits, with the private sector, government, and by investing in strategic communities around the world.
I want to tell our viewers that you have been with Microsoft a long time, 22 years. And you were in Australia for 8 years, EMEA for 3, Netherlands for 2. And maybe your accent gives it away a little bit. And you also are a lawyer by training. So love to hear a little bit about your journey through Microsoft. And, why does a legal background, and then also you were chief of staff to President Brad Smith, why all of that has come together in this point in time to make you the perfect person to be the leader of this extraordinary group?
I started at Microsoft 22 years ago. It makes me feel very old, actually. But I started as a very junior little baby lawyer and spent 13 years working in international roles, 8 years, as you said, in Australia, and then 5 years actually based in Copenhagen. And I then had the opportunity to move to Seattle, to Microsoft headquarters in 2012 for what was then a 2-year development opportunity, and that sort of grew into a 3-year opportunity, and that grew into the chief of staff role for Brad Smith, who's, as you said, is the president of Microsoft. And it was really in that role that I got more visibility to more of the social impact work the company does. And I had the opportunity in that role to help develop and incubate things like TechSpark, which is a community engagement initiative in the US, and see some of the social impact work that Microsoft was supporting around the world. And I had the chance to meet so many of our nonprofit partners doing incredible work all around the world as well. And I think it was that work that really opened my eyes to this work at Microsoft and lit the fire in me for this work. And I saw then, and I see now every day, the huge responsibility and the opportunity that Microsoft has to address some of the biggest societal challenges around the world. So it was really all of those experiences that kind of opened the door to this broader opportunity leading Microsoft Philanthropies.
So when you got that position, I'm assuming that Brad sat you down and you're having a conversation about your career and your advancement, and then you talked about this. How did you feel?
Oh, well, I think initially I was really overwhelmed, and it was a conversation. It wasn't one conversation. It was a conversation over, quite a long period of time. This might sound strange, just given my role leading Philanthropies, but I think I'm not so focused on Philanthropies. I'm really focused on the initiatives that we care about and that we're trying to support. And I see Philanthropies as one way and as one vehicle to help address those challenges. But we should be looking at, all the resources and all the different kinds of partnerships that we can have internally and externally to help address those challenges.
And I know that when we worked with you, it was just massive. And to try and connect the dots, and to your point, focus on the assets and then bring them together in terms of a thematic that's really going to be focused. I know that focus is absolutely a cornerstone of the work you do. So can you talk about the areas that you focus on? Because it allows you, obviously, to pick and choose where you're going to put your assets and your energies.
Yes, we have tried to. It's something I've been working on with the team, over the last year, is really all the time, how are we thinking about how are we thinking about what our focus should be? And it should be, it's really what can we uniquely bring to the table? And when we think about that in Philanthropies, it's the work that we do and the different digital inclusion initiatives that we have. And we have, Microsoft has focused on that for decades. We also look at how we can work with nonprofits to help them leverage technology to help build their own capacity to scale and to do more and to advance their own missions. We think about how to leverage our very active employee base. We have a really robust employee engagement program. So we look at how we can best leverage the generosity of our employees and in both the time and donations that they make. And we think also about how we can act as a convener and how can we bring others to the table around the issues that we're focused on.
And you know what? I think that's a great pause because I always do this section called By the Numbers. Mm-hmm. And so to give a greater sense to our listeners of the breadth and the scope of Microsoft, if you'll allow me, let me go a little business overview, but then your delicious programming because it's great. The company was founded in 1975, and I think back, gee, what was I doing in 1975? Its revenues are over 143 billion. It has over 160,000 employees, over 75 million customers, and you're in over 190 countries. Now, you're number 3 on the most admired list of Fortune, as I said, since 1998. And in terms of your social impact, this is where the numbers really get interesting. You focus, as you said, one area is inclusive economic opportunity. Last year, you donated 1.9 billion of products and services or discounted products to over 240 not-for-profits globally. Tremendous. You also had 20 new collaborations to close data by partnering with universities, companies, and governments. But you also protect fundamental human rights. You had 4 billion contributed to diverse-owned businesses. 100 plus services were provided for disaster response in 28 countries with over 1,000 employees providing tech support, absolutely critical after a disaster. You commit to a sustainable future with 21 million metric tons of carbon reduced by your suppliers, and then you empower some employees. You may have the most generous corporate matching program. And in conjunction with Microsoft and your employees last year, you donated over $221 million. So that's incredible. So again, getting back to Microsoft Philanthropies, let's kind of unpack that. So let's talk about COVID. Because you did a lot during COVID and you responded quickly. So what was it like being in the center of that, the decision making, and what really stood out for you?
Well, I'll say up front, it was certainly a roller coaster. I mean, I think for everyone, the global pandemic affected everyone in some way, right? And I always say there's nothing quite as unifying as a global pandemic. And we saw internally just incredible energy and collaboration across the company to help. I mean, everybody was looking at how can they step up to help address this crisis and also externally as well. But it was certainly a roller coaster. I will say it was my first year in role, and some days it was really overwhelming because you just saw the extent of the challenges. And some days it just felt like, wow, they're just so enormous. Like how given what we're doing, how can we really make a dent? And then other days, it was fantastic because you felt like, wow, I'm really in a position here to be able to help in some way.
So talk about some of the decision processes. I mean, did you have cross-functional team? You moved really quickly. I was watching you.
Right. I mean, I think Microsoft did. This was certainly not just a philanthropies effort. I mean, it was really company wide. And, I mentioned before how leadership from the top, and, we talked about Satya and his leadership around these kinds of issues. And likewise for Brad, who just is so supportive and was instrumental and at the heart of driving so many of the COVID response initiatives as well. I think when COVID struck, it was clear that we needed to do more and do more faster. And so we did some easy things quickly, like for example, like converting programmatic grants into general operating grants so that nonprofits could use the most critical needs. We supported some COVID relief funds both here in Washington State and globally. We also looked at, in Philanthropies, we looked at the Tech for Social Impact team and work. And, if you think about nonprofits and just the incredible pressure that they were under, with nonprofits around the world often functioning as first responders and helping to address the health and the social and the economic impacts of the pandemic. And so it was clear that we also had an opportunity to do more to help build the capacity of nonprofits who overnight, like the rest of us, had to move online and manage volunteers online, manage fundraising opportunities online. And so many nonprofits don't have the technology infrastructure. So we also kicked off some initiatives there specifically for nonprofits, but so many parts of the company were activated to respond to COVID. One of the first things the company did as well was to commit to paying hourly employees. So with people having to work remotely, Microsoft stepped up to continue paying its hourly employees regular wages, whether or not their full services were needed, which created a financial safety net for over the 4,500 hourly employees at the company. Microsoft's also investing in initiatives to protect public health. That's part of that's via our AI for Health initiative. But also there were additional investments made in COVID research, and all in partnership with nonprofits and academics and researchers. And we had some, creative initiatives as well. We had like a laptop drive, so having employees donate laptops that they might not be using, so that we could get devices into the hands of kids in the region who had to attend school remotely and who otherwise might not have access to a device. To things like we worked with our vendors and suppliers here in Puget Sound to provide 330,000 school lunches to all the kids.
Really important.
Yeah, really important. All the kids in the region who previously relied on the free lunch program, but of course they're not going to school and so we're missing out on food. And, as you know, for many kids, the free lunch program provides the one secure meal that they would get a day. So, there were just so many different initiatives across the company. And I always say that, if there was a silver lining out of COVID, it's perhaps this incredible collaboration that we have seen internally and externally. And I do think there's some of that we want to hang on to.
Can you talk a little bit about how you have a global team. So how did you were working remotely in a way, but now you are really remote. So any sort of tips and hints to our listeners, which is you're running this massive philanthropy, colleagues all over the globe, you're going faster, you don't even know the roadmap to follow for COVID. Anything special besides the collaboration, or how did you make the collaboration work better?
Well, firstly, over the last year, at times when I felt personally like a little frustrated at the working from home and whatnot. And I quickly remind myself it is an absolute privilege that we have the opportunity to work remotely. I think from within with my team, there were things that we had to think about a lot more deliberately, just in terms of how we're staying connected with the team. We had to be a lot more mindful of the different responsibilities that people were juggling, in addition to their work responsibilities, and ensure that there was flexibility for that. So I'm not I think, across the company in terms of collaboration, it was just it was initially like a flurry. I think I had like a hotline with Brad the first few weeks, because there were so many different ideas that were being discussed, and we had to kind of quickly think about where are we focusing and get into a good rhythm there. But it's a privilege really to be in this situation and working for a company that has the resources and the mindset to step up and help in so many different ways.
It's great that it did. And I saw it, I know that Just Capital reported on you and many others that were at the leading edge. So thank you for all those great efforts. Let's turn to some of your programmatic focus areas. Inclusive economic opportunity has been something on which you focused for a long time. How has that program grown? And maybe you can tell us a story about maybe one grantee that you're particularly proud of.
We've been focused in Philanthropies. Microsoft's been focused for decades on digital inclusion and inclusive economic opportunity. Early on during COVID, Satya said something like, we've seen 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. And it was so true. I think almost overnight, COVID upended almost every aspect of people's lives, obviously in hugely varying ways. But how we connect with our friends and families, how we work, whether we work, how teachers teach, how our kids are learning, and this digital transformation has sort of been driven by demand from business suddenly needing to operate remotely. You have, governments needing to provide services remotely, more telehealth, schools moving online. And clearly what we've seen is this rapid acceleration presents both challenges and opportunities. And we've been focused, way before COVID on the fact that it's so critical that everybody has access to digital skills that are needed to get the jobs of today. And it's not just tech jobs, it's tech-enabled jobs. We see almost every job requires some level of digital skills and digital fluency, even if it's not a tech job. And this digital divide isn't new, and the focus on digital skills isn't new, but COVID has exacerbated the issue. It's really driving a wedge between those who have access to the digital skills and those who don't. And so it's really essential that people get the digital skills and have access to get those skills needed to respond to this rapid transformation.
Absolutely. So why don't there's a nice segue to talk about TEALS. Because I know that TEALS is a beloved initiative of the company. So if you can explain the genesis of it, it's got a great story, and then how it's grown exponentially and had a huge impact.
TEALS is an amazing program. It stands for Technology, Education and Literacy in Schools, which is why we call it TEALS. And it helps bring computer science to schools across the US and recently has expanded to some schools in British Columbia. And it was founded by a computer science engineer called Kate Behncken about 12 years ago. And it's a really fantastic program. It relies on volunteers from the tech industry, and it's a team. It's like a team teach model. So classroom teachers partner with volunteers from the tech industry, and they work alongside for a period of time until the teacher, and it's typically the maths or the science teacher, but it could be other teachers as well, learn to teach computer science independently over time. And so if you look at the last school year, so the 2020-2021 school year, 10,000 students in the United States and BC had the opportunity to access the AP computer science courses, and which adds to I think it's around 85,000 students since the program began in 2009. So TEALS is currently in 450 high schools across the country, and it's fantastic. It relies on volunteers, so we've got about 1,500 volunteers from around 650 companies. And people sign up to teach for the school year, and it's typically the first class of the day. It's a really significant commitment from these incredible volunteers. And actually, as part of the broader company commitments on racial equity, we are also expanding TEALS over the next 5 years to 620 more high schools that have that have a higher percentage of African American and Black students as well.
I know there's a lot of listeners and they go, oh, come on. I mean, you gave it away. This was like our idea and you have all of these partners. How can you get credit for it? But that's not the reason. But I would love to hear about, because when Kevin started, I guess, history says, he called a couple friends and said, let's do it. But it caught on like wildfire. And so it says a lot about the company's ethos that it's so collaborative and open. Any key learning there, because you shared all the power and the glory?
Well, I mean, I think this is not a Microsoft issue. I mean, this is an issue for the country in terms of the numbers of schools that did not have access to computer science, and then you look at the number of jobs that require computer science degrees. I think firstly, Kevin had a real vision, and it's incredible the program that he built. I think what is key is that the fact that you do have volunteers from 650 companies. I mean, we're not just relying on Microsoft volunteers. I mean, this is helping.
Makes it sustainable.
Absolutely. It's helping the industry, and it's helping people across the country.
So I hear you have this 25 million initiative. So can you talk to me about that?
Yeah. So in June last year, I'd mentioned that we'd had a focus on skilling for employability, skilling for livelihoods for some time. But when COVID hit, obviously, unemployment numbers started skyrocketing, and global unemployment this year might reach 250 million people. And so that was an area, where we really were focused and thinking, okay, we're doing this work, but how do we do it more? How do we go bigger? How do we do it faster? And we wanted to do more to expand access to digital skills, especially for people that were hardest hit by job losses. So in June last year, Microsoft announced, together with LinkedIn, announced a commitment to bring more digital skills to 25 million people and provide access to the kinds of skills that we think will help find a job at a time of high employment. And if you think about how we're doing this, it's really three things. Firstly, we're working with LinkedIn and using LinkedIn data to determine the in-demand roles and also the skills needed to fill them. And secondly, we're providing people with access to that curriculum, so the content and the pathways to get those skills, and then offering a way for people to get certified and then help signal that certification and their skills to employers who are hiring.
I have to say, I cannot live without LinkedIn. I am on it. So it's such a valuable resource for content and connection making. Certainly especially during COVID, a lot of my old friends and colleagues we all got back together. So have you been able to monitor and to figure out how many connections, how many jobs have you gotten people into through this initiative?
Well, we know that we hit that 25 million number at the end of 2020, and so right now we're looking at how can we build on that, how can we continue to help those people that have connected with these pathways and these learning opportunities. So there's more to come.
Oh, that's fantastic! You got that really fast. So we hope that it's just something you're going to keep going. Great collaboration. Let's pivot to one of your other important commitments, and that's to protect fundamental rights. And so, why is it important for a technology company to go in this direction? And what are one or two of the actions that you're really proud of in this arena?
Well, I think recent events over the last year have really highlighted how much work is needed to protect the fundamental rights of people around the world. Last June, Satya made some further commitments to address systemic racial injustice and inequity, and both within Microsoft and also in communities around the world. And he talked about commitments in three areas. How do we help strengthen communities? How do we engage our own ecosystem at Microsoft? And then how do we increase representation and strengthen our culture of inclusion? Philanthropies is actually driving three key initiatives as part of those broader company commitments, and it's in the first bucket there around strengthening our communities. And I'm, really excited about these initiatives and the impact that they might have. One is around that I mentioned earlier, TEALS. So taking TEALS, getting computer science to more schools that have a high percentage of Black and African American students. And so the goal there is to expand to 620 high schools over the next 5 years. Another initiative we kicked off was a community skills grants program. And we were investing $5 million in cash grants to community-based nonprofit organisations that are both led by and serving African American people, and organisations that are providing digital skills training to these communities. And then the third initiative that we're focused on in Philanthropies is helping to build a capacity of nonprofits serving African American communities. So how do we help provide affordable access to technology and technology support to those organisations? I think the one thing with the community skills grants program, the way that we have gone about that, I think is a little different to how we have sometimes worked in the past. We have been learning a lot. We brought in stakeholders from the community to help us design that program, to help us think about what would success look like. And I think that's something that that we want to think more broadly about in terms of how do we apply that? How do we have community at the table in more of our programs as we did for that particular program? I think there's a lot that we're learning there.
Let's take a pause from our conversation with Kate and turn to our In the Know section. Well, it's been about 4 to 6 weeks when this runs since the Super Bowl. And of course, we all love the game, and Tom Brady was great. He'll, forever young. But we also watch for the commercials and the conversation that we can have. Are they good? Are they bad? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you want to throw some Doritos at the TV or do you want to eat them? Actually, prior to the big game, when we started seeing, again, those numbers about buying time, $5.5 million to buy a 30-second spot, it just got in my craw. And I said, what could a company do? And there's 40 to 50 ads on the Super Bowl. What happens if some of them sat out, like Budweiser? And Budweiser took its funds, partnered with the Ad Council, and created a commercial that only ran online to encourage people to get a vaccination to the pandemic, to COVID-19. Kudos for Budweiser. Of course, other brands from Anheuser-Busch, they did advertise. But it really bothered me. So with my colleague, Kristen Kenny, we started doing a little bit of analysis of what could, and we rounded it up to 6 million, because you've got, agency fees, and you also have talent. So it could have gone to 7 or 8, but we decided to take a 6 million number, and we asked the question, reaching 100 million people at once certainly comes at a high cost. But the sticker price of a Super Bowl ad comes with deeper implications, both for brands and society. What if that money was used for good? So here's a few numbers that we threw out to the readers of Sustainable Brands who broke the story right before the Super Bowl. If you worked with Feeding America, you could provide 60 million meals to the hungry. Or with Habitat for Humanity, you could build about 50 houses across the U.S. UNICEF could deliver 2.5 to 3 million doses of malaria treatments. Action Against Hunger could save the lives of 40,000 children who might otherwise die from hunger. The Nova Scotia Nature Trust could save 240,000 acres of forest as part of its Double the Wild campaign. Best Friends Animal Society could save over 40,000 homeless dogs and cats from being euthanized and finding forever homes. United Negro College Fund might send 150 students to a 4-year college tuition-free. Of course, that's likely at a state university because the tuition had to be a bit lower. So you can see, and those are just only some of the ways you could use $6 million for good. So I want to challenge companies to truly say, do we want to spend $6 million, $7 million, $8 million on the Super Bowl? Why don't we do it for something really innovative and breakthrough? And I'll have to give a plug for myself. You could buy the development and you could handle the distribution for most of My Special Aflac Ducks, a social robot that we created for Aflac that comforts children going through 1,000 days of pediatric cancer treatments. It helps them with comfort. It helps them to feel like they're not alone. It speaks, it quacks, it purrs. It's a really cool item. And I'd like to do one for autism. So if there's anybody out there that wants to help create a social robot to help kids communicate with autism, I'm your gal. I'd like to make another comment about the Super Bowl and their ads. I loved Jeep, The Road Ahead. And Jeep, in its 2-minute spot with Bruce Springsteen, the first that he's ever done, and he's been approached about 10 times to do an ad, finally a brand looked at its core values, his core values, and then found an intersection, which was the divided country that we're in. And they created this amazing short, I'm going to call it a film. Now, how did the public respond? 50%, yay! 50%, no. It was seen to be the most divisive spot shown during the Super Bowl. But it was memorable. And it truly wasn't about seeing the Jeep and doing wheelies and going through snow and river and rocks. It was about a theme, about a man and a country looking at the middle of the country and how could we come back together. I think it was great. So kudos. I'm going to give you a Carol Cone on purpose. I've been called the Purpose Queen, or recently the Purpose Goddess, a 2 thumbs up and a woohoo. Loved what you did, Jeep. But here's my challenge to you. I eagerly went online to find out more about the road ahead. But there's not what I wanted to see. I want to see how you're going to bring people together. The Jeep spot caused a lot of conversation. Consumer intelligence company Brandwatch said that Jeep was the 5th most cited brand during the game, with 27,000 mentions on Twitter, giving it about a 3% of all brand mentions for the night. Social analytics firm Talkwalker found Jeep generated 47,000 mentions on Sunday and has since generated another 150,000 engagements, making an increase of over 1,000% from February 6th. And Adweek had the following comments. In 2021, the message of unity is seen as partisan with, depending on your ideology, the opposite side of the political spectrum not contributing to bringing the nation back together. Jeep would have had to have had known that this message and tone would be received as such from the public. The folks at Jeep are really smart. The visuals, the words, they were beautiful. I'm thrilled, and I want to give kudos again to Jeep for taking this on, having the guts and the bravado to do it. And I know this is going to help them move forward with the brand. And I hope that 6 months or a year from now, they're going to be doing actions on a social impact basis to truly help us to reunite. So kudos to Jeep. Now back to our conversation with Kate at Microsoft. I want to ask just a couple things that are probably outside of Microsoft Philanthropies, but something that just really got my attention. When you declared to go carbon negative by 2030, that was like, whoa, that is a big, bold bet. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious about, it's tangential to what you're doing, but it's part of your ethos. How did you feel when you heard that? Were you part of any of those discussions?
I think it's an incredible, ambitious goal. And, when I think about the Microsoft mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, and I think about how the company is very focused on how do we ensure that the technology being created benefits everyone on the planet, including the planet itself. And so, it's a fantastic initiative. I think I can speak for so many people. We just felt so proud. So proud of working for a company that takes on these ambitious goals and really steps up for something that is a global issue.
Yeah, it was. I was just being in the field when we saw that, and everybody was talking about it, and it wasn't one of these pie in the sky things. It was like, oh yeah, Microsoft, they continue to lead. They continue to be introspective. They look at all of their constituents, and I'm glad you said that the planet is a stakeholder.
Right.
So that's really great. I want to also just mention one of the other things about Microsoft that I love. And by the way, I give speeches all over, and I just realized I have at least 3 or 4 references to Microsoft in my speech. So one of the areas that I talk about is meaning. And providing meaning. And the other, and this was more product related, but when you created the adaptive controller to allow anybody with different abilities to play, mm-hmm. children or adults, that just said, oh my God, that's so smart. And I know that you won tons of awards in Cannes. So again, I don't know if you got to touch that at all, or you just got to be a bystander and you just felt a lot of pride.
I for sure was a bystander and feeling a lot of pride. But I think it's a good example of how this concept of profit and purpose is being thought about in companies. I think traditionally, or maybe many years ago, the concept of those ideas were perhaps more siloed than they are today. And I think more and more companies are thinking about how to think about profit and purpose together, and that they can coexist, and perhaps they should coexist. And so it speaks to how social impact initiatives are popping up across the company and not just in philanthropies.
So now you gave me a great segue. So I want to talk about your employee giving and matching, because you have made philanthropists or social impact entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs all over the world with your own people. So can you talk about, it's such a generous program and how it works and how you feel, to your point, it knits the company together?
We often say that giving is in our DNA. And it really is. I mean, it really is. Microsoft employees have been so engaged in the employee giving program since it started in 1983. I will say this year, our culture of giving is stronger than it's ever been. We hit a lot of new milestones this year with the company giving program. Back in June, we reached a new milestone of over $2 billion in employee giving, including the company match since the start of the program. And I think you mentioned that, last fiscal year, employees donated about $221 million, inclusive of the match, to more than 30,000 nonprofits.
30,000.
I know. And actually, the hours, there were employees volunteered more than 750,000 hours in the US alone, which that's about 67 years of volunteering. Somebody worked that out. I was like, that's amazing. But I think, these results remind us of every day. They remind us of the generosity of Microsoft employees and also the diversity of the organizations and the causes that our employees care about. And the collective power of our employee engagement program. We can talk about helping 30,000 nonprofits and 750,000 hours of volunteering, but the most important thing to remember is behind those numbers are real people and real lives being impacted. And we for sure just saw our employees step up so much over the last year. In terms of COVID response efforts. It's really amazing.
Our listeners, it's a podcast, but Kate is just beaming because she just loves the authenticity of it. See, that's what is so great about, and also I just think that, again, the culture that, Microsoft in the beginning, when Bill Gates, wanted to, put a computer on everyone's desk, and he did it with such fervor. And now it's like helping the world to truly understand, how technology can benefit the world. So I think that's great. Obviously, AI is really important to the company, and you have created this highly strategic umbrella called AI for Good. Mm-hmm. And that sounds really intriguing. Can you tell us about the various initiatives under it?
It's an incredible initiative, and we have AI for Earth, we have AI for accessibility, we have AI for humanitarian action, which sits in Philanthropies, AI for culture, and we have this is all about how to harness the power of AI, and how do we work with others that are working in these areas to help them harness the power of AI. It's terrific. In Philanthropies, we have AI for humanitarian action, and that's all about how do we help address the world recover. How do we help the world recover from disasters, address the needs of women and children, refugees and displaced people? How do we promote respect for human rights? But then there's these other initiatives as well around accessibility and AI for Earth. It's a fantastic way to partner with organisations that are doing terrific work in these areas and see if there's a way that we can help support that work.
That's an extraordinary direction, and it's so spot on for our needs. Unfortunately, we're getting down to the bottom of our conversation, but you and I could chat for the longest time. So I always love to end our conversations with our guests where you can give 3 insights for someone who they're on the career in terms of sustainability or purpose. They want to work perhaps in an organization in Microsoft Philanthropies. And, what kind of, or it's a student, or I get a lot of career changers. Everybody wants to work in purpose. But what are 3 insights that you want to give to someone to truly steward the direction of their company or their brand. So it's much more impactful in terms of, what it does and then its outcomes.
One thing I love about the mission of Microsoft, right? And I think Satya did a great job distilling what could be like a super complicated mission into something very succinct and very powerful that's relevant, whatever your role is at the company. Because wherever you sit, you can see how your role can contribute to that mission and how you can be an agent of change. And I think the first thing I'd say is if you're interested in purpose and social impact work and making a difference, you don't necessarily need to sit in the Philanthropies organisation or the CSR organisation. Like, you should really look at, what is your role? Where do you have influence? What could your own business be doing to focus on this work? The second thing I would say is I have a lot of people reaching out who are really interested in working in philanthropies, and which is fantastic. and they'll often lead with, I'm really passionate about philanthropies, which is fantastic. But I think it's also so important to be really clear about, like, what are the skill sets that you can bring to this work. I mean, one of the reasons that I was really interested in this role is I, of course, was interested in philanthropies. I was very interested in the social impact initiatives and the issues that we care about. But I'm also really interested in I don't know if it's the right way to phrase it, but like the business of philanthropies and the opportunity that we have to think about the broader company resources and how to have different kinds of partnerships internally to do this work. So I would that's probably the second piece of advice there.
No, but I think that's wonderful because you started out that way. That's why I asked you about when you sit in the chief, when you're chief of staff and when you have the legal background, so you're deep in the business, you immediately brought a business view to doing good, and it's just knitted in everything you're saying. So and that's where it's going. So I'm thrilled you're sharing that with our listeners.
Well, it's interesting. I was having a call with somebody in the business last week. And they made this comment to me, and they said something like, "Well, philanthropies used to sit off to the side, but now that social impact is becoming much more mainstream." And I thought about that afterwards, and I was like, it's fantastic, right? I mean, I think it's more people across the company see the responsibility that the company has to do this, to do this work, and to make a difference. And I think more people are also seeing the value that this work can have more broadly across the company and the relationships that the company has more broadly as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they probably pitch you every day. I'm sure you're giving career advice, at least to your Microsoft colleagues, every single day. I threaten on my end, I'm going to hold like webinars, right. Like how do you get a job in purpose? So this has been a fabulous conversation, Kate. I just wanted to say, I know there's a lot more that you might want to share, but are there a few more closing comments that you'd like to share about the power of Microsoft Philanthropies, or a story within your work that just is, so memorable? But, I'm turning over the mic to you.
Maybe two things that are sort of top of mind for me of late. And one actually came out of a conversation that I was having with some colleagues last week. And they were talking about the economist Theodore Levitt, and how he talks about, you should focus on customer needs rather than a corporation's products. And it's this idea that, people don't want quarter-inch drill bits, they want quarter-inch holes. And this colleague of mine who's in philanthropies, he sort of took a little bit further and said, well, people don't really want quarter-inch holes either. Maybe they want shelves in their garage so that they can store their tools and feel more organised and free up space to park their car. And I think that same principle applies to our work. People, when we anchor so much of the work we do in philanthropies around digital inclusion, digital equity, digital inequity. But people don't want or sort of need digital inclusion. They want an education so that they get skills needed to have a livelihood that can provide a good life for them and their family. And so it was just a really good reminder, that conversation last week, that just remaining focused on the outcomes and the benefits that our programs can have on communities around the world.
And you just defined achieve more.
Right.
Because it's not about the bit or the 4-inch hole or whatever. It's about what you're doing with it.
Exactly. And then the last thing I would say is, we've talked about how the sort of collective urgency over the last year has led to increased collaboration and partnerships and, more appetite to partner in new ways. And that collaboration is essential. These issues that we're talking about are just too massive for any one company or one government or, one industry to tackle alone. I think it's important to think about partnerships in new ways. And there's a quote that I love that I always talk about just because I think it's so true. If you want to go wide, go with government. If you want to go deep, you go with NGOs and academic institutions. If you want to go fast, you go with the private sector. And if you want to go far, you must go together. I think about this a lot, and I think it's never been more important to come together and think about partnerships in new ways so that we can help address these issues that we care about.
Fantastic. That is just a wonderful way to end our conversation. I want to thank you, Kate. It's been just a joy to see Microsoft go so far since the earliest days. And so thank you so much for your time. And I just want to ask our listeners, what do you stand for?